Okie dokie. Dark bleatings, everyone, as we say here at Happy Goat Horror. I am thrilled we have Joel Lansdale with us today, who I'm sure that this name is familiar to pretty much everybody that watches my channel. But Joe is a novelist, a screenplay writer, I was going to say, a script writer, has worked on comic books, has won numerous awards, and has written across several genres. So I'm really excited to have you here with us, Joe. Welcome and hello.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
We are specifically talking about this lovely new book that I'm not sure what the US release date was, but it came out on the 7th of October here in the UK, and this is The Essential Horror
Yeah,
of Joel Lansdale.
yeah,
Um, would you like to tell people a little bit about what it is?
yeah. Well, as you said, the essential horror. But what they did, what the publisher did, and what I did, is to do this book. Me and the editor, Rick Claw, got together and took a combination of my stories that we felt were amongst the most impactful, and we also tried to pick those that gave it a little more variation. And we put this book together. There were other stories we could have put in, added in, but there's only so much space.
Mhm.
So this has a really good overview of my career from early stories, middle range stories to later stories.
Yeah, it spans quite a lot of your career
Yes,
timeline.
yeah. That's
Um,
just too big a word for me, so I didn't use it.
I have notes on all of the stories in here with me just because so
Okay.
I don't mix any titles up. But there are some that I found are quite funny in a really dark way. Some
Yeah.
that were horrendous, like in a good way, but like with the characters and everything, like the inner monologue of some of the characters.
Mm.
And then we have zombies, which is my favorite. That's just my absolute favorite.
It's everybody's favorite.
Who doesn't love zombies? Absolutely everyone does. It was yeah, that was on the far side of the Cadillac Desert with dead folks, and I
Right.
originally read that in the Mammoth Book of Zombies.
Yes, yes. That's a nice collection of stories, zombie stories. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great collection and quite a lot of variety in there.
Yeah. That was
Um,
Stephen, wasn't it? Stephen Jones that did that? Was he
yeah,
the
Stephen
editor?
Jones,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Something that I wanted to talk to you about, and
Okay.
funnily enough, this has come up in two different conversations that I've been a part of a couple, like over the last few weeks, where your name
Okay.
tends to come up quite a lot actually when I'm talking books with people, and we were talking about the importance of telling the truth about people and how you depict them, regardless of how uncomfortable that might be
Yep.
sometimes, especially in terms of language and views and things.
Yep.
And there were a few stories in this book, particularly the last one, Night They
Night
Missed
they
the
missed
Horror
the
Show,
horror show. Yeah. Hmm.
um, where I found some of those characters so hard to read because unfortunately they
They're
reminded
bad
me of
characters. Yeah.
yeah, reminded me of people I've come across that I would rather not be around.
I grew up with those people, and not all people were like that. I'm talking about these were examples of those type of people. And strangely enough, that story is actually based on true events. Now, I extrapolated them for a much farther, darker range to make my point
Mhm,
about racism and the casualness of it, and
mhm.
especially when I was growing up and during that era. And I had friends that would not go see Night They Missed the Horror Show because they thought, well, no, there's a black guy in it, although they weren't saying black guy.
Hmm.
And I just thought, wow, that never went away from me. I kept it in my brain somewhere. And then I had people I knew, in fact, one was kin to me, that were involved in some of the incidents that are in the story, including hooking up the dead dog. That really
Mm.
happened. And so some of those things are the catalyst for me to be able to write this story and to extrapolate it in a larger format to make the, I guess, message. I hate to use that term, but the thoughts that I was trying to project more powerful.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I think if you're writing characters like that and you're too afraid to like really go there with how they actually think, talk, and behave, it
Yeah.
you lose the point of your own story.
Yeah,
So,
you do. You do. The narrative has to be impactful, especially when you're dealing with something like that. I wanted people to know what it was like. and
Mhm.
sometimes still is like, but was specifically like that then. And it's a way of all of us, also of us seeing that we have come a long way, that
Mhm.
things are a lot better. I mean, there are those like little alleys ways where there are this, a lot of this still goes on, but on the whole, we don't have it like this anymore. And people say, oh, well, good, we don't have to talk about it. No, that's where you're wrong.
Mhm.
It's like why we keep repeating history. I don't see that we learn much from history. We should. And
Yeah.
uh, and one of the ways you learn is to explore it and not hide it behind a curtain, or to make it all so much more digestible that it's tapioca pudding. It
Mhm.
should be a little raw and a little bloody. It should be something that strikes these notes where people go, okay, I get the story. The story's, a story is powerful, but something else going on here too. And there's something going on here that makes me think and makes me realize what's going on. So I'm really opposed to those people that let's sugarcoat everything. Let's have everything perfect. Because what the hell are you doing writing stories in the first place if you're not willing to
Mhm.
go out there and show them with their pants down? Because that's exactly what's going on. There are different kinds of stories. I know that not all stories have to be this way, and I've certainly
Mhm.
written stories that aren't. But I do believe that some of the best stories, and certainly my best stories that I've done, had these elements to them
Mhm.
about reality, and that you're dealing with that. I don't care if it's supernatural, non supernatural, because the scariest thing are humans.
Mhm.
And I think it's a way, too, of getting people to invest into listening to or reading these things in such a way that they get a story, but they also get something else.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it shows a lot of integrity from an artistic standpoint to be this honest about things, because I know a lot of authors, especially these days, are afraid of just coming under fire for things because we're kind of in this sort
Yeah,
of cancel culture type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And
No, I know. And I always think, well, if you and I think people can express opinions I totally disagree with. I think
Mhm.
that we've always done that, and in the U.S., until lately now we're starting to get all of this pushback
Mhm.
from both sides of the fence, by the way, and saying, "Oh, we can't say this, we can't do that, we cancel you for this, we cancel you for that." But if anybody reads this story and uses the littlest bit of common sense, they'll see where I'm going with this and what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to say. And if you write horror stories, the fact that they're uncomfortable should not be a shock.
No.
And if you're adding social and political issues into it without necessarily, preaching,
Mhm.
just adding those things in where they're visible, then all the more likely it's going to be just a little bit, you know, hair raising.
Yeah, and it should be that way. I think all good
Yeah, yeah,
fiction makes you think a little more, that raises questions for you. And the thing that I really enjoyed about your book, and especially this collection, because again, we get to cross your career kind of with it and
yeah.
see, I think you've got long-time readers that have been reading you a long time. And whenever I write a book review, I hope to bring new readers to the author when I've enjoyed a book. And I made a point in my review of mentioning some of the language in terms of the racist characters and things, and the things that would bring discomfort, but
Right.
I think context is really important.
The
And I
context is all of it. That's it. If
yeah,
people just open it up and look, they go, "Oh, that word offends me," or "That
yeah.
scene offends me," but yet they don't have the context of it.
Hmm.
And you can dislike the context. You have that right,
Hmm.
but you need to understand the context before you start saying a story is racist, because it's just the
Yes.
opposite. It's like trying to say Huckleberry Finn ought to be canceled because the language is offensive. It should be offensive. Trump
Yeah.
was, he's our guy Trump. I don't want to get in politics, but he's just opened up this horrible window to people being terribly, terribly racist. But the other side has opened up this horrible window to not talking about things that are real. And so if they meet in the back end of the same people, really.
Hmm.
The extremes are always the same. But I think of Twain, for instance, and Huckleberry Finn. Um, there was no more anti-racist writer than Twain,
Hmm.
and he does it by being honest and by being clever. And I'm always surprised when people say we want to remove that word. or we want to remove that scene,
Hmm.
because what you're doing is you're minimizing what made it powerful in the first place and what impacted me as a child living in a racist society. When I read Huckleberry Finn and I got about halfway through, I went, "Oh, I get it.
Hmm.
I see what he's doing here." And I was I was young.
Hmm.
And same thing with To Kill a Mockingbird. Oh, it's got that language in it. Well, of course it has that language in it. That's the language they were using.
Yeah.
And that shows you the extreme of that view and how these people felt. When I was growing up, it was the only word used to refer to black people,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know.
I well, the reason that I made mention of it in my review is because I've seen a lot of people like
Sure.
with Stephen King, for example, the number of people that I see that are about 20 years old that are dipping into Stephen King for the first time and they pick something from the 80s or 90s, and then I just see like Stephen King's racist because he uses these, and I'm like, oh, you didn't
There's
read
nobody
very
more
far in.
non-racist than Stephen King, you
Yeah,
know, and that should be very obvious from his work.
his work and also just his public standing and the things that he talks about constantly. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's why I wanted to make a mention of that in my review to make sure I was
Right.
like, listen, guys, you're going to be uncomfortable, but that's because these characters have been depicted realistically, and we've all met people like that. So,
Yeah, and you got a new group of readers that are looking to be offended, and sometimes they read work that's supposed to be offensive in its own way, trying to make a
mhm,
certain point, and then my God, they're offended. Well, no shit, if you're reading this kind of work and that it's meant to make you think, and I don't support racist views by any means, any shape or
yeah.
form. And that's why I write what I write, because I was around that and it impacted me and scarred me. And
Mhm,
for me, it's probably the thing that bothered me the most. I've written about it in a lot of stories and a lot of books. I've written about other things too and will, but that was one of those things where when I was growing up, that it really was, I guess, again, I would refer to it as a scar. Now,
mhm,
I don't feel responsible for it, but I feel responsible for if I don't speak up about it.
mhm,
I feel responsible if I don't make my impact with what tools I have.
mhm,
And this whole idea about Stephen King by a bunch of 20-year-olds who, barely know how to read. And I'm not knocking all 20-year-olds, because
mhm.
I know a few that are just fine. But the point is that you have this new generation, and they're saying, and even though the story took place in the 70s, 80s, that's got nothing to do with it. It
Mhm.
can be written now. It can be about now. And
Mhm.
it depends on, again, context. But the
Yeah.
idea that you have to apologize for it being 70s and 80s, and that's how it was. And it still is to some extent, although it should change because the environment has
Yeah.
changed, but it doesn't make those stories less powerful or wrong in any manner, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's just reflective of society of the
Yeah,
time. So
exactly.
sometimes if I read a book that was maybe written in the 50s and I review it and there's just outdated language that was just used as standard in the prose, I'll say that, oh, this has some outdated language, but it doesn't really, unless I think the author was like a horrible bigot and it wasn't just
Yeah, and it
common
happens
language.
sometimes it is.
Yeah. I have heard it said, and I agree with this, a lot of times I've read lots of other reviews of your work as well, and I've heard loads of people talk about your work, and um, everyone is seems to be very of the opinion that you are very against racism, and that's why you write
Very
about it
much.
so effectively. And I recently watched an interview with Brian Keane where he talked about your work, and he compared you to Tarantino, but he said that Tarantino will tell the truth but with a lot of shock value, and Lansdale tells the truth effectively. I paraphrased, but that's essentially what he said is that you tell the truth about people and you write them as they are, and everything that you put in is necessary for your
Yeah,
character's
I think these
story.
things over. I don't do these things just willy-nilly. As a writer, it should read like it's effortless, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that writing it's always effortless.
Oh no, I still have not finished my own first novel, and I because it's really hard.
It's hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's way more work than I at first realized it was, and I have even more respect for novelists now. Um, Flipping from um that particular subject matter, one of the other
Okay.
stories in the book that I absolutely loved, just because the idea was, firstly, the ending was really great, and it was just such a. It felt like a break from some of the really heavier stuff, but also
Yeah.
it still had a heavy theme, and it was Dog, Cat, and Baby.
Yeah. Yeah. That really upsets some people. And I think it's so obviously a satire and kind of a warning, And
Yeah.
when my kids were little, we had the little jump swing between the doors, and
Mhm.
we had a dog and a cat. And so I always thought, well, I'm not leaving the kid alone with the dog and the cat, although I'm sure that Keith would have been fine. The cat and the dog might have had trouble. But the point is that I thought about it and I thought, as a parent, you should be vigilant. And
Yes,
I
yeah.
thought, what are the dog and the cat thinking?
Yeah, because you never know. They're tricksy little beasts.
Yeah,
So for anyone who hasn't read this story yet, it's about uh jealous rivalry between a cat and
yeah,
dog, and it was so funny, and I see why it may have upset people, but I just thought it was it's because
it's
I
so
have
obviously over the top. It shouldn't.
yeah, I have cats, and I'm always like, sometimes I look at one of them and I'm like, what are you doing? Because you can never know what a cat is thinking.
No,
And,
you don't. A dog, you can. They're very guilty.
oh yeah, they're very expressive.
Yeah,
And
right.
I lived with someone while I had a cat who had a dog, and I was very concerned about the dog being aggressive to my cat, and as it turned out, it was the other way round, and just had to monitor that like they were children all the time. So yeah, I really enjoyed that story. And
Good.
was there anything that actually sparked that off, like with one of your own pets or something, or did that idea just kind of come out of nowhere?
Well, I used to have my son in one of those little jump things between the doors,
Yeah.
and I would see my dog and cat watching him jumping up and down, and that's really and that's the catalyst, and the fact that sometimes animals do hurt children, especially with neglectful parents
Mhm.
or ill-trained animals, and so it wasn't totally a false concern,
Mhm.
but because you don't know, but that generated that story. It's just that's as simple as that.
It's the slightest. Well, I was attacked by a dog when I was a baby. I'm not afraid of dogs, and I never have been because I guess I don't remember it. But yeah, I wouldn't even blame the dog for that really because it's environment and they're unpredictable with
Yeah,
their emotions and stuff. So
yeah. So I mean, but it's something you would normally be careful of, and
Mhm.
and I thought about it, and I thought, what if you weren't careful, and what if your animals were not good animals?
Yeah,
this, what are they thinking?
I think what got me about that, and again, it is. I think if you kind of get the tone of it, it is really funny to read. Or that could
Yeah.
just be me being
No,
a
no, no.
demented person.
You're supposed to. You're supposed to get that. And I read it just the other night aloud. I read a couple of stories, and I finished up with that one. And you people were laughing, but there were also some people that were like that. Like, wait a minute, the baby's gonna get it, or they're after the baby, or you know. So there were a lot of things I thought, well, it's pretty obvious what's going on.
It was really funny because I feel like you really captured the spirit of the cat and dog, but like you kind of gave them some how a human might think about these things, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
calculations. So
yeah.
yeah, I just had to bring that one up because that was one of my
Okay.
favorites, and I really enjoyed it. Um, so I think as an overall comment on the collection, the things that I enjoyed most about it was sort of you kind of get the passage of time as we've already mentioned through your fiction. Um,
Yeah,
the mixture of not just the subgenres you go into with the horror, but also the the tone of the stories. There's so much variety. Sometimes I read collections and anthologies that even though I like the stories, it feels a bit like one note. Whereas this, I was like traumatized in one story and then laughing in the next one.
Yeah.
And you got a few really short pieces in there as well that like kind of broke it up and altered the pacing a little bit. Um, how much thought went into the order that you placed everything?
I have to give a lot of credit to Rick Claw. I mean, I had some suggestions and got to look at how he put it together, but Rick Claw was my editor on
Hmm.
that for Tachyon and on several books of mine. And so, he said, well, this is the order I think. I may have suggested a switch or on a couple of stories, but on the whole, I have to give him a lot of credit for that.
Hmm. Okay. What do you think makes a great editor for someone to work with on a project like this?
That know someone who knows what the author is about, not somebody who wants to change the author or to change the author to fit them.
Hmm.
If they know what the author is about and what the author is trying to accomplish, there's less editing involved.
Hmm.
And yet, when they make a suggestion, it's made in the course of understanding that the writer may have failed to achieve exactly what they meant, or
Hmm.
they might be able to achieve it on a higher level by a little bit of fine tuning here, a little bit of fine tuning there. But the best editor is the one that mostly leaves you alone.
Hmm. Hmm. I was about to ask you if because the act of writing itself is very solitary as a process goes, but then you come a point where it becomes a collaboration. And I was wondering, do you which part of the process do you prefer? Do you enjoy like working with other people once your manuscript is done?
No, no, I
No.
don't. uh, I'm fortunate is that I've only had like in my whole career of 52 years, I've
Hmm.
only had a couple of editors which were meddlesome, and I just pulled the work,
Hmm.
But I don't mind the suggestion, especially if it makes sense. I go, I should have done that. And sometimes the ones that strike me best are ones of where I thought about it and I thought, well, maybe, but I didn't do it. And
Hmm.
then they pick up on that, and I go, okay, I should have listened to myself. So a lot of times they're making me aware of my own thoughts about something,
Hmm.
that I didn't adhere to strong enough, So um, that's important. So I will certainly make any change that I think is a good one.
Hmm.
And what I really like are proofreaders, even though I argue with them a lot too, because I'm not going to change certain East Texisms
Hmm.
and I'm not going to change certain stylistic choices unless you've got a really damn good idea of how to be done. But I love them in the sense they catch my spelling, they catch when I do miss something or I leave a word out, just more or less mechanical things that when you've looked at something long enough, you start to not see it as well as you did originally.
Yeah, I've had that experience just with shorts that I've written where I must have read them 1,000 times, and yet somehow there's always typos and stuff that when I
Oh, it
think
never
it's
fails. My sorry, I'm gonna plug this in. I started my battery was getting a little low. The thing that always happens to me, it seems, is it comes the book comes to me and I look at it and the first thing I see is a mistake, a typo. It never fails. And it may be the only one in there, but as soon as I open it, I see it. And I think, why didn't I see that before? Once in a while, it's made after me. But
Mhm.
most of the time, I had the opportunity and I missed it.
It's I think when you know your own story, you read
Yeah,
it and your eyes see what you know
yeah,
you
you fill
meant.
it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you fill it in. All right.
Just wanted to touch on, you said you're 52 years into your career, did you just say?
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, and I'm only 30, so I don't know.
That's incredible.
Yeah, 52
Um,
years. I sold my first piece I wrote with my mom under her name, which was a little paragraph like that later won a prize. We did that for a farm magazine, and I was 21 years old. And I began to sell nonfiction, but I
mhm.
always wanted to be a fiction writer. And thanks to my wife, I became one. And I started selling fiction in my mid-20s, somewhere around in there. And then by the time I was 29, I was full time. But I
Wow.
worked all kinds of other jobs,
Hmm.
unbelievable number of rotten jobs, everything from aluminum chair factory to janitor, which was actually my favorite of all of those jobs,
Hmm.
except for farming. We had a farm, organic farm, and a goat dairy. I really liked that. But I mean, I did all kinds of things. By the time I was 29, I've never done anything else but write.
That's amazing. That's like the career of a lot of people's dreams is just full-time
It,
writing. But
it's
to
harder than people think. You
oh
know,
yeah,
becoming a writer is hard, but staying a writer is harder. You
yeah,
know, and I have a lot of friends who are very good writers, but they couldn't make a living doing just writing. It just
yeah.
wasn't there. You know, they had to do other jobs and you know, and no more power to them. A lot of time, you know, a lot of times you have people that the reason there aren't writers is because it's them.
Hmm.
And sometimes the work's just not valuable enough to continue to be published. Sometimes the work is good, but the work ethic isn't.
Hmm.
Sometimes the work is good, but they just took a wrong turn at Albuquerque, as they said in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. And you know, a lot of those things, there's so many factors. Nearly all the writers I know, even good writers, work other jobs. You know, so
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. And it's always been that way. That isn't new. I remember Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho and all that. He did advertising and all sorts of stuff along with writing. I mean, he eventually did go full
Hmm.
time, but a lot of the writers that the past and present and will be the
Hmm.
future are doing something else other than writing. So I feel extremely fortunate that, especially with most of the writers that I kind of knew or grew up with and
Hmm.
around, although I didn't really meet a writer till I'd been writing for several years, or an editor or anybody. I was living in the country, but I feel very fortunate because a lot of them should have made it.
Yeah.
And it's not always their fault. Sometimes it's just the market, the fact that they have a certain voice that fits a certain moment, but not the
Yeah.
next moment, you know?
Well, that's something that I've learned from getting to speak with so many full-time authors, is that the road to full-time it has looked different for every single author I've spoken with.
Yeah,
It happened differently for everybody, and the sheer amount of work, and then also the flip side of it, where one author that I know very well said they don't want to complain about being a full-time author because that's the dream, but it doesn't
yeah,
look like what people assume, that you make loads of money and
yeah.
you're rich and everything. And the reality for a lot of people is that maybe that publisher won't sign your next contract, so you've written a book and you don't know
Yeah,
where to
you know,
sell
you
it.
never
And
know. I mean, I'm fortunate in that I actually have made a lot of money and I've
yeah.
done quite well, but I've had ups and downs in that process. And you do. And, you know, there have been two or three times when I was just cooking right along and all of a sudden the bottom would fall out of the pan. And I would think, oh, hell, this is done. And then something else and I've always had the fortunate ability to switch from writing novels to short stories to comics to
Mhm.
film to essays. And so every time I think that, oh, that's it, then some other door opens, you know, for me. And I've been
Yeah.
around long enough that people look for me. So I don't have to go out and hunt as much
Mhm.
like I did when I first started, you know. And I learned, I earned my spot.
Mhm.
My friend Bill Paxton, I don't know if you know him. He's gone now. He died a few
I
years
have a
back. Was an actor.
tattoo of Bill on my arm.
No, really.
Yeah.
He was a friend of mine, you know, and we were once talking, and he said, "All I ever wanted, Joe, was to have a place at the table."
Hmm.
I said, "Me too. That's all I ever wanted." You know,
Yeah.
I didn't set out to be famous or rich or anything like that, and I turned out to be far more wealthy and famous than I deserve, even though I wouldn't call me famous in the broader sense, but famous more than I ever expected in life. You know, I always felt I would end up doing another job for the rest of my life while I wrote, and that maybe when I retired, I could go full time at 65. Well, I'm
Mhm.
74 this month and I'm still working and I got stuff on my plate that's due that I've got to get done, you know, and that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
I agree with Bill. I just was looking for my place at the table, you know. But it's interesting about the tattoo. Bill was a friend of mine. I really loved him. I miss him.
Oh, well, I never had the pleasure of meeting him, but in particular, it's a Near Dark Tattoo. I really love that film, and
Oh, I love that film too. I think Bill's fantastic in
he,
that.
he is the highlight. That's one of my favorite performances of all time, and
Yes, me too. Yeah.
I have
Yeah, he's very good in that.
oh yeah, wonderful. And I do have a general rule that I will not get somebody's face tattooed to me because you never because sometimes things come out later and you're like, well, but
Yeah, right.
I thought I think I'm safe with Bill. Like
You
he's
are. You are
yeah.
safe with Bill. And he also was a great director, directed Frailty. And Frailty is this very, if you haven't seen it, look it up. He stars in it and he directed it. It's one of McConaughey's early films, and Powers Booth is in it. All Texans, by the way. And the guy who wrote the screenplay, also a Texan, Brent Hanley, a terrific screenplay writer. It wasn't filmed in Texas, I don't think, but it takes place in Texas, and it's an extraordinarily and surprising film. And in fact, Bill and the same screenwriter, Brent Hanley, we were working on one of my books, The Bottoms, for
Mhm.
about 8 years when unfortunately Bill had to go in the hospital for something
Mhm.
on his heart and didn't survive it. But yeah, he was a great guy, great director, and just and a good friend. He's the only person in Hollywood that I had a handshake deal with.
Oh, oh, that's lovely to like. Yeah, as a major Bill Paxton fan, that's just lovely to hear from people
Yeah.
who
Oh
knew.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we were so much alike because he was from Texas, he was from Fort Worth. I'm more east, which is a little different, but he would say say stuff that I totally understood because I grew up with. Oh, Joe, they're working me like a rented mule. Well they used to rent mules. And people unfortunately would work that mule because they had paid to rent that mule by the hour or by the day or whatever. So Bill was when he said they're working me like a rented mule. I knew what he was talking about. So we had a lot of these metaphors and similes that we had grown up with as part of
Mhm.
being Texans,
Yeah, you have
So
like a natural
yeah,
shorthand.
right. We had the shorthand. We could get right to something.
Oh God, I can imagine that that's especially handy with someone when you're working on anything with them. And uh
Yeah,
yeah, that brings me to you've had a lot of work adapted for the screen for film
I
and
have.
TV.
Yeah.
And I wondered since you said you don't really enjoy like the collaborative part when you're done with a
No,
book.
I love writing though. I mean, when
Yeah.
I get up in the morning, it's the most exciting part of my day. I only work about 3 hours a day, and
Mhm.
that's all I've done for most of my career. Not all, but most,
Mhm.
because I find that after 3 hours, I get diminishing returns. And
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I've been doing it a long time, and I'm sorry I veered away from your
Well,
question.
that's
If
okay.
you want to ask it again, my daughter's taking my dog out, so yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah, I was just asking you about how you find the process, if your work is being
oh
adapted and you're
yeah,
involved, what that's like for you.
well, if I'm involved, they're going to do what they want anyway.
Mhm.
I always said that I was a co-executive producer on the Hap and Leonard series, and I always said it gave me the right to say anything I wanted and them
Mhm.
the right to do anything they wanted. So
Yeah.
it was a wash. But I was treated very, very well in Hap and Leonard and Cold in July and Bubba Hotep, Don Coscarelli. I mean, talk about being simpatico. We were, and Bruce
Mhm.
Campbell. We were all just kind of on the same page. And so I was very, very happy with that adaptation. Some of the Tim Miller adaptations for Love, Death, and Robots. They did three of mine. They were just delicious. They did a terrific job. There's one minor change in one of the stories, and I've had some that I wasn't as happy with.
Mhm.
And I've had some that I thought the Thicket was a good movie, but I didn't think it was really my movie. It
Yeah.
wasn't enough of my book. It was about 40-50% of the book, maybe, and then it went astray. Now, did it go astray badly? No, but is it what I would have liked? Well, not totally. But that doesn't mean I cry when it's on. I
Yeah.
just don't.
It's
Yeah.
kind guess that's kind of like
I
the
cash the check. If you're willing to cash the option checks and you're
mhm.
willing to cash the check for it's made, and then shut the hell up, unless you have a stronger producer credential.
Mhm. Mhm.
As co-executive producer, didn't give me a lot of credential,
Mhm.
and it gave me some, and it gave me more money, and I wrote a script for the series, for the Happen Leonard series. But it's one of those things that's it. I don't know why they can't be closer to the novels. I've heard some people say, well, if you've got the novel, why would you have the movie? Why, if you want
Mhm.
the book, read the book. Well, yeah, I want the book, but you know what? I want the film to remind me of the book.
Yeah.
And I want it to be pretty much the book. I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite film, and it's so much like the novel. They left a lot out,
Mhm.
but you can't tell. You don't feel that because it's one of the greatest film adaptations of all time, and it's just important to me that the story reflect what I was trying to do. I think they're exceptions to anything,
Mhm.
Sometimes a book is just not filmable, but there's something at the heart of it that's important. The One Battle After Another, which just came out, which I really love,
Mhm.
is based on a Thomas Pynchon novel. Well, you're not going to be able to literally adapt any novel, but you're certainly not going to be able to do that with a Thomas Pynchon novel. I
Mhm.
think it was called Vineland, was the one it was based on, but it feels like Thomas Pynchon, and it has that attitude, but it's not the sort of novel that you can just go from the first to the end and
Yeah.
adapt. But
Yeah.
most of mine you can, and sure. And I always said too, I may not write the world's best dialogue, but I write the world's best Joe Lansdale dialogue.
Yes.
And so I think you should leave it alone more.
How does it feel to so when you have written something and you've had it published as a book, like that's one thing. I'm always really excited if I manage to sell a short story when the book comes out. I'm like, yay! But there must be another level to that if it's been adapted and now you're seeing it like in a different medium. And how
Hmm.
other people have interpreted
It's
it.
a different feeling. It's a different thing. I think I like it not even just because it's an extension of you that a
Mhm.
lot of people might not be aware of, and therefore that's one reason you want the movies to be good and close
Mhm.
to the material, because then when people are directed the material, they don't go or they don't go,
Mhm.
oh wow, that's great, the movie's better, and sometimes it is. Sometimes the
Mhm.
movies are better, but not often, not frequently. If I were to say book and movie, book's going to be usually better than the movie.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
it's an extension of you and it's an extension of your ideas, which is why you can sometimes be disappointed
Mhm.
because you want it to be an extension of you, an extension of your ideas that you recognize.
Mhm. Yeah,
But but it is, and just to say though, it is a good feeling. And I did things too sometimes that, like I wrote a script based on my novel, The Big Blow, for Ridley Scott,
Mhm.
and I had options. Before that, I had them from David Lynch. So I made a ton of money off of that, and it's never been filmed. And they brought in other people to do other screenplays, never been filmed. They've come back to my screenplay, never been filmed, and probably never will. But I bought a house.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been filmed yet. Let's keep
Yeah,
our fingers
yeah, well,
crossed.
yeah. Every once in a while that'll pop up, but it's so dark and things are so politically correct right now. I just don't see that happening unless
Mm,
maybe there's another way because things change. But it is another film dealing with racism, dealing with the Great Hurricane of 1900 in Galveston. It's one of my most peculiar books. I think the novella won a Bram Stoker, and I'm really proud of it. And it came very close to getting made a couple of times, but it never happened. But I cashed the checks, and the thing about that, it kept me writing. It kept me doing other work. It kept me
yeah.
doing novels and comics, and I love it all as long as it's something I choose.
Mhm.
I've done some ghost work and some pen name work, and I really don't enjoy it. It's not that I wouldn't do it again if I felt like I had to make sure my family was taken care of. But now my
Yeah.
family, my kids are grown. My daughter has her own novel coming out next year and a short story collection. My son's selling comics. He's had a couple of films made. So I mean, they're on their own now. But I was always willing to do what I needed to do,
Mhm.
but I always tried to do it as well as I could do it.
Yes, yeah. Well, you've certainly earned your place at the table, as you said, with
Yeah, I hope
the
so.
work you've done. I was gonna say
Yeah.
the double-edged sword, if you're the author that an adaptation is based on, is that if people don't like the film or the show, they always blame the author, even though
Yeah,
it's usually
yeah.
nothing to do with it.
Well, with film, one of the things about film that's different from a book, you can blame the book because the author wrote it, and he might have had some editorial, instruction, or and that might have harmed it. But generally, that's the author. But when you do a film, it's really hard to say that. Bruce Campbell and I were talking once, and he was saying that you can take the best screenwriter that's just gotten all kinds of attention, this great director that everybody's hot on, a hot actor, based on a very popular best-selling book, and you get Congo.
Yeah.
Because he was in Congo, which I don't think it's as bad as some things, but nonetheless, I got Bruce's point.
Mhm.
Is that the thing in film is that also if you write a script, the interpretation of that script is by a lot of hands.
Yeah.
You have an actor perhaps that just doesn't get that way of saying things, and
Mhm.
so they present the line in a way that that's not how you heard it in your head, and it may in fact change the whole point and purpose of that
Mhm.
scene. And sometimes you get, as Bruce told me too, he said if you ever direct, which I hope to do, is that make sure everybody's in the same movie.
Mhm.
Because sometimes they're not. You'll feel this performance, and sometimes it's a really great performance. You go, how does that fit in?
Mhm.
Because their viewpoint is so different from all the other characters in the film. And that script, they may be following the script, and the other people are following the script, but they're not getting the same tonality. They're
It's
getting a different thing. And the director may have a vision. They
yeah.
often have a vision. It means they don't have a vision. It means that they have your work to screw up. And there are exceptions. There are exceptions to that. There's some great directors, and I've been fortunate to work with some like Don Coscarelli and Jim Mickle for just two examples. But the thing is that most of the time they don't really have much of a vision. What they have is that I've got to screw this up, not purposely, but I've got to add me to it.
Mhm.
Well, their me a lot of times isn't worth adding to it.
Mhm.
It's like putting salt in iced tea. It's just not really that tasty.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of that because they don't want anybody to think, well, it's the book that's responsible. It's me.
Yeah. I
And that's true all the way through. I mean, actors, writers, whatever. And I've worked with some wonderful people. I mean, James Purefoy, Michael K. Williams, Michael C. Hall,
mhm.
Sam Shepard, Don Johnson. They've been people that have worked on my work that I just loved to death and thought did great work and interpreted very, very well the screenplays. And the screenplays, of course, they're also one step removed from the book. Even
Mhm.
when I've liked the screenplays, I've often thought, now I wouldn't have done that. But on
Mhm.
the other hand, I cashed your check.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's why the movie's different and why the writer gets blamed a lot of times. But the book writer had nothing to do with that. And the screenwriter sometimes didn't have anything to do with it either because they've changed it so many times, or,
Yeah.
or the director has decided they're going to do some writing, and sometimes to the advantage, but sometimes to the disadvantage, and so on and so on.
I've seen, yeah, it's amazing how people can connect to you through your writing, even if the way they've interpreted it is completely different to what you set out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A funny comment that I saw, I watched the TV adaptation of Interview with the Vampire recently,
Uh-huh.
and one of the complainy comments on it was that Anne Rice can't write black characters, and I was like, Anne Rice didn't they changed the race of a character from the book, so
Yeah.
the way that
He
she
didn't write black characters.
I was like, that might be a valid criticism, I don't know, but
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
particular
Well,
character, that wasn't
yeah.
even
I
what she
mean, yeah. I mean, you can decide whether they should have or shouldn't have. Maybe she shouldn't have. Maybe she felt she couldn't. And maybe, especially in that world when that was written, it probably didn't occur because you were
she
living
was
in a different universe, a
yeah.
different bubble. And white people have stories too. And so that was the story that was told. I mean, I've had black characters, gay characters.
Mhm.
I mean, you name it, female leads and everything, all my stuff all the way through, because that's always been what I've tried to do. And then you get criticized. Well, you're not black. Why did you have a black character? Well, how can you write about a black character? Or how can you write about a woman? And you know what? Whether I did it right or wrong, I at least tried to be inclusive in what I was doing.
Yeah.
because I feel like I know black people
Mhm.
and I know women, and I know all the ins and outs of it? Obviously not.
Mhm.
But the thing is that when you get right down to it, in the end of it all, we're all after the same things in life. You
Mhm.
know, we're trying to accomplish certain things. And how can I ever learn about somebody else without trying to step into their shoes, successfully
Mhm.
or unsuccessfully? You know?
Yeah, I think that that's always about intention because I proofread for people sometimes and do light edits and things, and every now and then I'll read a female character where some element of the female experience, in my opinion, isn't done very well, but the author was trying, like the intention behind it was decent. So I wouldn't like hammer somebody over something that's got a little bit awry when I know what they meant. Um, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think you do a great job of with character in particular, because you have written so many different types of people and some that are nothing like yourself at all, and
Oh,
then
great to know.
yeah, and I'm sure some that do have some things in common with you. And
Certainly.
I think that what you do capture is it how people interact with each other. Because that's a bugbear of mine in novels when people are having conversations, and I think, I don't know if anyone would actually ever have this conversation or talk like
Yeah.
this. I think that there's a real like rawness to the way that you write communication between your
You know,
characters.
one of the things I would say about that is when you write, I mean, my belief is that you're trying to write about those conversations that people really have, not the ones that other people want you to have.
Yeah,
And sometimes men have uncomfortable conversations about women, about life,
yeah.
but it's not always negative. It's sometimes it's I mean, you got a modern thing is if a man is attracted to a woman and says so, then people are upset with that. But that guy's still thinking that, whether
Hmm.
they're saying it or not. It doesn't mean they're necessarily thinking evil, but they're thinking sexuality. That's how we meet.
Yeah.
We're attracted to people. Then you need other things, and
Mhm.
life shouldn't be about that alone. But to dismiss it as not being part of biology or the
Mhm.
way we live, um, it is. I mean, it's one of those disappointing things in some ways because in life we all hope to be one of the beautiful people, but we aren't all among the beautiful people. But we still are attracted to the beautiful people because they're the
Mhm.
beautiful people.
Yeah.
And biology works that way. And I think when you're writing about characters in an honest moment of thought or conversation with somebody that's very intimate with them or someone they can
Mhm.
talk to, that the conversations are different. And I hate it when people try to bullshit them. Now, should people think like that? I don't think you get a choice. I think biology makes those decisions for you. And to pretend that that isn't a factor is just a lie. You know, it's just a lie.
Yeah.
We socialize things as we should. Because if we didn't socialize things, we'd all be a bunch of cavemen, and
Mhm.
cave women, and all those things are important to make, and we would be absolutely tribal. And that's our problem with white, black, brown, Asian, whatever it is. It's that tribal aspect that we don't want to rule us. We want to recognize it and say, okay, life's bigger than that.
Mhm.
And one of the things I love, when I was growing up, you didn't see black and white people together, or white and Hispanic people together, Asian, whatever. Everybody had their own lane. Well, now it's so mixed that when I go to my hometown, because I'm actually in California right now, but when I go to my hometown, it's not uncommon to see all of these people dating in college, and people mixed marriages and children that are beautiful with all these different attributes of different races, and I just when I was growing up, you didn't see that, and so to
Yeah.
me that's a factor too.
Yeah, it's that's something else that I really enjoy about your character work is I see so many people in your stories that I have met, say 20 years ago, and every now and then still find them. So I'm from a really tiny little town, and when I was
Okay,
growing up, I mean, I'm sure that there were gay people, for example, but people were
sure.
closeted because I don't
and
say
probably
everyone.
dead for their own life, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to say like everyone's prejudiced, but there was this general feeling of that wouldn't be okay. And
Yeah, I
um,
grew up in that. When I was growing
yeah,
up, that was part of my culture and part of my belief as a child or as a young person. And the same way with black people, whatever. And then when you get older, you start going, wait a minute, these are people. And then you either begin to evolve or you don't, because it's really just innocence as a child. You just don't know any better.
yeah.
But if you continue not to know any better, that's on you.
Yeah, I agree. I moved to a city. It's just Cardiff, so it's a small city by comparison to a lot, but it's like the capital city of Wales. And the difference between that and where I was from, even though it's about 45 minutes away, was unbelievable to me. They were just all types of people. And I was like, oh, this isn't even a thing here. Like this isn't
No.
even something that is like picked up on. And then I moved back to my hometown some years later, and I was like, oh, people are still the same here. Like there's still,
Yeah,
it's
it
very
can be that
noticeable.
way, can it?
I was like, wow, like I don't think that people are generally as close-minded as they were, but there is still this sort of
There's also this, and it is called fitting in. There
hmm,
are a lot of people that don't necessarily think that way, but they're not going to reveal that because that will ostracize them. They will be
yeah.
put aside
Mhm.
because, oh my God, they said great things about gay people, or they're gay, or
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
sympathetic to it, and that's not culturally acceptable within certain bubbles. I'm not trying to tar everybody with the same brush. But
Yeah.
there was a time in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s, you could tar a
Mhm.
large percentage with that brush because it was cultural, it was social. And I've always said the cure to a lot of that is knowing people unlike you.
Mhm.
You know, and Mark Twain says something about a person that travels can't be prejudiced. Well,
Mhm.
they can, but it's less likely once you get out and meet other people and start knowing other cultures and realize that your culture is not the only one. I
Mhm.
mean, I love my culture, but that don't mean I have to isolate myself and my thinking within it. You know,
Yeah. How do you think? So, through the years that you've been writing, and I think that you have reflected a lot of societal issues and opinions and attitudes through your writing, how do
right?
you think things have changed as time has gone on, and how has that impacted how you tell stories now?
Well, one of the things that's changed dramatically is, and even though we talk about racism a lot, and it's and should, and it's part of it, it's nowhere what it was. You know,
Hmm.
we see its worst examples now, but the world used to be its worst example.
Hmm.
And when I was growing up in the South, and I'm not just doing the South because the North was different in another way; they had the same thing, but it was awful. And the fact is that black people didn't have the opportunities to show what they could do. They
Hmm.
didn't have the education. They weren't offered the jobs that might lead them to better jobs.
Hmm.
They so in other words that's changed dramatically. And there were people who was if there was a black doctor, they wouldn't go to them because they would just think they were incompetent because they were black. You know, it's just that prejudice that used to exist, though, and again, there's always a factor of that. But on the whole, that doesn't exist anymore. You
Hmm.
know, it's not like it did then. I would say that's probably the main thing. Gay people were people that you either beat up or killed when I was growing
Crazy.
up. You know, isn't that awful?
Yeah.
You know, they were demonized instead. And I always say there's probably a lot of gay people I'd hate, a lot of black people I'd hate, a lot of white people I'd hate, but there's a lot of people, white, gay, black, I'd love. In
Hmm.
fact, do because it's always it's your character that matters, not your sexual orientation or the color of your skin.
Hmm.
So that has changed. That I mean, I remember Martin Luther King making his speech about character, and you know he was right. He predicted it, and those things have changed. So I see those primarily.
Hmm.
The other changes are less. They're personal in a different way, and that's technology
Hmm.
is both powerful and wonderful, and the worst thing that ever happened. You know,
Yeah.
it's in readers are being destroyed by technology.
Hmm.
And people are being destroyed by the fact that they don't teach people the basic needs of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that sounds like an old conservative guy, but I'm not. I'm old, but I'm not conservative.
No,
But
I
I'm
agree.
I'm practical,
Yeah.
and I think that you know people have lost that. that ability to do something besides scroll on their phone. And I've got a phone and I love my phone. I make calls, I got my email, I can look up stuff when I want to, and I can scroll from time to time. But I've read 9 books in the last 2.5 weeks,
Mhm.
and I feel like I'm slacking. And yet I've gone to the movies and I watch certain TV shows and I do exercise and until recently I was teaching martial arts. I had an operation that kind of went awry, so it's kind of put me out of that for a while, maybe forever at my age now. But I just think that technology is a two-edged sword, and I believe that's another one of the big changes.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you meant those things too,
Yeah.
but and I think just the way politics works has become insane.
Mhm.
It's no longer about what's good for the people. It's about one-upmanship, and it's about ownership, and it's about this group against this group instead of these groups having enough differences that it worked out. I used to vote to both sides to some degree.
Mhm.
Can't do that now,
No,
and both extremes are crazy, and it's harder to find that middle ground anymore.
yeah, I a lot of the times in the last few years especially, I've picked books up and thought there are 50% of people will not even give this a chance because of the political theme in it, regardless of how the theme's dealt with.
Yeah,
People are very on a side
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah. Um
And I think it's fine to want books that aren't political. I'm nothing against that. You read what you want to read, but I just wish more people read in general. And
yeah.
that's really fallen off. I've noticed in the last 5 years in particular. It's just like that. And film is the same way. Film is struggling for a lot of
Mm.
reasons, a lot of them technical. And so a lot of the things that people like me have made their living off of for the next generation, and then like you, man, you're up against it, and I mean, I hate to say that, but I think that's true. It was hard. Anytime you start to be a writer, it's hard, and it was hard when I started, and I worked hard. One of the things that I think was very positive about my time was you had to earn your place. You weren't just published. Oh, I can't. I got to get published, so I'll just go out and publish it myself. Well, nothing wrong with self-publishing unto itself, but it shouldn't be like the immediate thing because it hasn't been vetted. And
Yeah.
being disappointed and being rejected, I literally got 1,000 rejection strips, before I started getting acceptance.
Hmm.
And even now and again, you'll get something for whatever reason. But that makes you a writer right there. That's what makes you a writer. Yet on the other side, the negative for the new generation is the fact that we used to have a lot more markets. When I wrote 90 stories in 90 days when I first started because my wife put me in that position to do it. She said, "You quit, you go in there and write for 3 months, and then you can go back to work, but you do a story." And I didn't know you couldn't do a story a day, so I did. And back then, I was not working 3 hours a day. I was working the whole day because she said, "When I come home, you better have something written." So I
Amazing
thought,
though.
"Oh, hell, I don't want that. I'm scared of that woman, love her as I do." And so I wrote a story a day. And over a period of 4 years, because back then you were mailing things back and
Mhm.
forth, I could send one story to 10, 15 markets, sometimes more, depending on the story. And I'm also sure I sent things to markets that weren't a good idea, but I didn't know. I'd never met an editor. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I really didn't. I just typed them up, made copies, did the things they wanted, the postage return and all that. So I could get 10 to 15 rejects at least on one story. So over 4 years, I got 1,000 rejects. My wife and I counted them. And in fact, when I had one special edition that I did of my work, the stuff that wasn't published, I didn't keep all, burn most of it,
Mhm.
but I kept a few things. I thought, well, they're kind of okay. We put them in a limited book. I think it was like 500 copies. But in a special part of that, there was an even more limited edition. I think the number of the alphabet. I took one of those rejects and put it in each one. We put them in each one of the
Mhm.
books. The company did, and but that's the way I learned to write. I mean, I'd been writing all my life.
Mhm.
I had written stories and books and, the usual awful stuff that we do. And those 90 stories, which were primarily awful to okay, but they taught me because it was like getting crap out of your system, like you were crap through a goose. You're getting rid of that, and oh, I feel better. And so then you can start writing things that are a little bit closer to your own voice about
Mhm.
who you are, not who they are. And that was very important to me. And I just don't see the opportunities these days for people to be bad, because you could have levels of magazines up and middle and
Mhm.
high. So I started with Mike Shane Mystery Magazine, which published some good stories, but it was certainly at the bottom of the market. And
Mhm.
those stories were, not my best stories. How could they be? They were my earliest stories, but they gave me an opportunity to move to better markets and
Mhm.
to experience being published, and you learn from all that. And I don't think this generation has that opportunity. There are more markets than people realize. Some of them are online and
Mhm.
whatever. And I became kind of like the anthology king. I was writing stories for anthologies
Mhm.
right and left, but there are fewer anthologies. And used to anthologies, a largest percentage of them were all published by major publishers, not
Yeah.
small press. I mean, that always been some small press ones, but they were major publishers. Now that's not the case anymore.
No, I have noticed a drop off over the years of in mainstream publishing for anthologies, and
Exactly.
I've heard people saying, "Oh, well, people just don't want short stories anymore," and I'm like, "Don't they?" Because
Yeah,
there's a
you would
reason.
think, but you know what? I've said that for years, and I've been proven wrong for 52 years. The I don't know, and I'll talk to people out there. You don't like short stories? No, I like to get involved in the book, and short stories are my favorite. And I started out as a short story writer, and I did enough that where at one time in life I could have made a living writing short stories. It would not have been the living that I had later writing novels and short stories, but I could have done it for a while there, and things shifted because you can write so many different kinds of ideas. You can work with so many different kinds of characters. You can experiment with style. You can experiment with the way you attack a story, the
Mhm.
characters. You can experiment with writing a lot more dialogue or writing less dialogue. I mean, and you can do those in novels too. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm saying short stories lend themselves to variety and experimentation far more than novels do, especially if you're trying to be a commercial novelist.
Mhm.
And I might have been better had I been a much more commercial writer. Uh, I'm not without that aspect. I'm a storyteller, but I didn't fit the mold of the next bestseller.
Mhm.
That's just not where my mind was, and where my heart was. And it turned out really well for me. At least so far. So far.
Um, yeah, there's certainly an art to short stories. I think a lot of people assume that they're much easier to write than longer fiction, which in some ways, yes, I guess,
Yes
but
and no. Yeah, yes and
yeah,
no. What
but
was it?
there's
Was it Somerset Mom that said a novel's the easy way to write a short story? Because I think that's true. Because a novel you can relax a little bit, you can open up a little bit. It's got different expectations, but a short story, especially sometimes, I try to write stories that are a variety. Some
Mhm.
are character driven, some are idea driven, some are a combination of those things. But to be able, if you're doing a character driven story, to do that in a short story
Yeah.
is really hard. And at the same time, keep the story's momentum and to keep its point of view. And it's what's a lot of like literary magazine, and I've published in literary magazines and I read a lot of things of that nature, but so much of it to me is just so boring.
Mhm.
And when you reach the end, you go, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Because I still come from that more storytelling tradition. It isn't that I haven't experimented with that sort of thing and been, thank goodness, successful doing that as well. But I've always felt that I'm driving with a genre engine, but the chassis has a lot more literary aspect to it, and certainly the upholstery.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that. The yeah, trying to tell a full story in say 5,000 words with character development or make it so the readers even care about the characters is so
It is
different to
difficult.
yeah.
Yeah.
The first thing I ever had published was it was a 100 word flash fiction, and I'd been getting rejected for years. I had nothing published, and I really think that that was because I was taking a script writing class, and the tutor said if you cannot condense the most interesting thing about your plot into a one sentence pitch, you've
It's called
overthought
the
it.
elevator pitch.
Yeah, the elevator pitch. And he said that if you can't write a 100-word synopsis that will get someone interested in your script, then you don't know. Like, so I started practicing. I took all the short stories that I'd had rejected and I started trying to condense them into 100-word flash fictions. And I feel like that exercise did me some good about
It
like,
did. And one of the things about film though is I find that when I try to do that in a sentence or two, the kind of stories I like to write, they're hard to do like that.
yeah,
Because it's not just like a wonderful idea like there's a giant shark in the ocean and it's terrorizing the beach.
yeah.
Well, we go, "Ooh, that sounds good," but I may have a story that I think is really good, but
Mhm.
wow, being able to break it down in the couples, it's not that kind of story because it's
Yeah.
about the characters or whatever. And once I'm always hoping that one of those kind of ideas will come to me.
Yeah.
But it just it doesn't always though, and it's a knack. But it's screenplays, I can write them. I've never had any trouble writing them. I think they're the easiest thing, along with comics are the easiest for me. But I love comics and I love screenplays, but I find them much easier to do than prose.
Yeah.
Prose is first it takes longer, and you're telling a lot more.
Mhm.
You can choose to just make it a story or a novel with a camera eye. Maltese Falcon would be a great example of that. But most of the time, you have that generous opportunity
Mhm.
to show what people are thinking or to give more time to a certain idea or scene than you have in a script. The idea in a script is always enter a scene as late as you can and exit as early as you can.
Mhm. Okay.
And yeah, and in writing prose, because when I'm writing scripts, I feel like I'm writing, not writing, but writing for the
Mm.
brand, as we used to say, the Western, people is that I'm that's my brand, and I'm
Mhm.
writing for them. But when I'm writing a novel, I'm not writing for the brand. I write like everybody I know is dead. I'm writing for me, screw them, screw the reader. And then when I get through, I go, I hope the reader likes it. But when you're creating it, it's a different mindset.
Mhm.
Because if you're sitting there thinking, well, will this be a bestseller? Will
Mhm.
the agent love it? Will the editor love it? Will my mom be offended? Which you got to go, fuck it. I'm not doing that. I'm writing like everybody I know is dead. I'm writing for me. Nobody else exists. And
That
then when you get through, you can worry about it.
that is some of the greatest writing advice I've ever received.
I don't know. It may not be.
Well, it's worked well for you, Joe. So.
Yeah, it works well for me. Some people might say, well, gosh, I want to write what the people want to read. Well, I never, some people have that ability more. I
Mhm.
remember I had a conversation with Dean Koontz, and I always felt that Dean kind of knew what people wanted
Mhm.
more, and I didn't. And I've always said when I give a lecture or I'm speaking or whatever, and I look out at the crowd, the 100 people or small 5, 10 people, whatever the situation is, I always think, I don't know what they want, not
Mhm.
as a writer anyway. I can kind of judge, from you doing this so long, you kind of know how to shift ideas, but I don't know what they want. So how am I going to be able to sit down and make sure Billy and Willie and Jilly and Zilly all get something that they like? I don't
Yeah.
know that. But what I do know is I know what I like.
Mhm.
And if I get done what I like, then there's odds are there's going to be at least a lot of people that are going to like it.
Mhm.
You also have to understand you're not going to be universally admired and no need to try to be. It's
Yeah.
just not going to happen.
Yeah. I think if everyone has the same opinion of you, you've done something a bit wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And I know I have friends that do this, and I also just know other people who do it. But there are a lot of bestsellers, and they just if I could be a bestseller on my own terms, hey, yeah, that's fine. And when I've had some real successes here and there, but the point is, I've read some books, and it's the same book every time. It's
Mhm.
got some minor variation, but it's the same book because they have an audience that maybe only reads one book a year, that
Mhm.
bestseller, or a handful of bestsellers. So they want that same experience. They want that comfortable pair of bunny slippers on
Mhm.
so that they can, you know, have that experience they had last year. but it's because they're not reading a lot of other stuff. And so to them, it's maybe not even as noticeable
Mhm.
that it's the same experience because it's, once a year you read the same book, really,
Yeah.
with some minor variation. There's one writer, and I won't name them, but they have it's somebody who they thought was dead and they see them, they're alive. Or it's somebody that they thought had, gone to the moon or something, and wait, there they are. Or there's my wife and she's supposedly dead. And it's at every book. And
Mhm.
sometimes the technology for it is different.
Mhm.
That they may see them on a camera, they may see them on Twitter,
Mhm.
some picture, or they see them living a totally different life with a different, but it's that plot
Mhm.
every time. And it's successful for them, and I think what they're doing is they're looking at writing as much more of a job
Mhm.
than I do. And it's not that I think it's not a job and that it can't be a job. I make a living at this, and that was always my dream. But my dream wasn't to get up every morning and go, oh God, I got to
Yeah.
write that crap again. I could have just stayed and worked for the aluminum chair factory and become a manager.
Mhm.
It's just not what I want. But I don't knock other people for that. It's just
Yeah.
not what I want.
Well, I will say, since we are kind of on time now, so I do have to let you go shortly. But I will say, for people who do enjoy massive amounts of variety and not the same story over and over, the
Yeah.
essential horror of Joel Lansdale is
Yeah.
perfect for
Thank you.
that. I will give you the last word on this book, and anything else that you would like to promote to people, Joe. But the last thing that I would like to say to people about this is that I am the kind of reader that normally likes to cozy up to the main character. So, um, before I read this, I would have described myself as perhaps not the ideal reader, but even a reader like me, I am obsessed. So,
Thank
I think that I found your writing so engaging, and especially with your locations and everything. Like, I've never been to America. I've never been in sort of like a Western setting as you write them, but I can really see myself there through your prose. So
you.
I would definitely recommend this to horror fans, obviously, people who enjoy short stories, especially fans of your work, um, if they have not yet already ordered or pre-ordered this. Um, and yes, thank you for the great reading experience, Joe. I had such a blast with this, and I think I went through my whole unit of emotions at some point. But yes,
Yeah.
what would you like people to know about it?
Well, I'd like to know that though those are among my very best stories. That my variety is still wide. I have a lot of comic things. I have a lot of just pure character things. And so if you read this, it's a way to say, okay, maybe I like this. Maybe I want, or maybe I want to see that other side. Maybe I want to read his novel, The Bottoms or The Thicket, and maybe one of the Happen Leonard novels in the series, because they're all different. They're all different and they all take a different standpoint. I'll read Sunset and Sawdust, which is, another one that I would recommend in my own work, or A Fine Dark Line. All those things I say and list because some of them are have things in common, but some of them are very different too. So I go for difference.
Yes, go for difference. Um, that is, I think that's a lovely note to leave it on. Thank you once again, Joe, for doing this. It's
Glad to
such
be
an
here.
honor to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
And for everyone listening and watching, I will put the link for this book in particular in the description, also Joe's website, and there'll be a little list of everything that we talked about. If you want to go and check out anything else that we've talked about, that will all be there in the descriptions for you. Thank you again, Joe. Thank you all for
Well,
watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Bye and bleed, as we say.